Welcome back to the Nebraska Furniture Mart Locker Room Show, where I'm joined now by Breland Moore and Jared Kohler for tonight's Roundtable. All right, guys, at the top of the show, we heard from the Chiefs about signing long-term contracts and wanting to play in Kansas City. Mitchell Schwartz, of course, talking about how the league determines value of a player by how much they make. So, Breland, with Patrick Mahomes, Chris Jones, and other Chiefs up for new contracts, do you think that monetary value is actually a true reflection of a player's worth?
Yeah and no. Obviously, you are going to pay your best players the most amount of money. Patrick Mahomes, going to roll out that Brinks truck there. So we are well aware that that's traditionally how it works. But when you have a team that's stacked like the Kansas City Chiefs, keep in mind how many returners they're bringing back from that Super Bowl team. It's hard to really justify that that's just the only reason because there are so many players. And there is a such thing as a salary cap. There is a limit to this whole thing. So you cannot pay every player their worth. You know, that's just going to happen. There are going to be things that fall through the wayside so you can continue to pay other players and keep them on their roster. But also, you know, let's just be real. Contracts don't ever determine your worth as an employee. Let's take TV, for example. I hope that that's not my worth in any market that I've ever worked in. So, you know, there's a ton of different reasons why you'd want to stay somewhere, even though they aren't necessarily paying you what you deserve to be paid. For instance, take the Kansas City Chiefs, Super Bowl champions. You have so many returners. I don't know about you, Dani, but I would take a pay cut to stay on a team like that. But we've seen that other places as well. When I was in Buffalo, I covered the Buffalo Bills, and Kyle Williams definitely had opportunity to go elsewhere, but they weren't even winning. He just wanted to stay because he genuinely loved the community and he was beloved by fans there. So there are intangibles and there are other reasons why someone would want to continue to stay on a team that they aren't necessarily the top paid player. So it really just depends on the person.
Yeah, and I also think that it's not necessarily how much you are worth currently to a team, but what you've accomplished and what you've built up until that point. Because for all these teams know, if you're signing a new player who's won 2 or 3 World Series or a Super Bowl and now they're going to a different team, like Stefan Wisniewski, who got paid a lot to go to Pittsburgh now, but he's got 2 Super Bowls under his belt. So he's getting paid for the fact that he won 2 Super Bowls. Now bring that here. Are you worth that? We don't quite know yet, but we do know what you've accomplished in the past, and that is why we are paying you the amount that we are now. So, Jared, let's switch gears over to you. The Major League Baseball draft was this week as the Royals add 6 new prospects. So, what are your thoughts on the Royals' future after all this?
Well, Dani, this week I think the Royals' foundation for what the future Royals will look like really came into focus for 21, 22, 2023. And remember, when Dayton Moore was hired 15 years ago, what's that quote that stands out? He said, "Pitching is the currency of baseball." And right now, the Royals are flat out richer than they've ever been before. Let's think back to 2014 and 15 when they won the World Series, back-to-back AL pennants. That starting rotation was really pieced together by undervalued free agents and bold trades. But how was that Royals team, that core built? Contact hitting, defense, bullpen pitching, and speed. The formula now, totally different for what the next winning Royals team will look like. Because if you listen to what Dayton Moore said to the media after round 1 earlier this week, he said they're not able to compete with the market's power pitching. Garrett Cole signing for $300 million with the Yankees. He's never coming to Kansas City. The Royals simply cannot attract power pitching in this small market business that baseball is. So they have to get that through the draft. And how are they doing it? By throwing numbers at the situation. 47 college pitchers are now Kansas City Royals over the last 3 MLB drafts. Think about that. 47 pitchers invested in the college draft. That is a lot, especially in baseball, but let's kind of look at the odds here. Let's look at baseball history. If half of those guys even reach the big leagues, they're beating the odds. Then half of those guys are probably only going to be bullpen pieces. So then you're looking at about 10 starters, maybe, if the Royals are lucky. And out of those, probably only 5 or less will be bona fide top of the rotation options. So if the Royals get 3 aces out of this, 2 aces, they should be throwing a parade because they're beating the odds. If you look at the Royals' development, Yordano Ventura was the only homegrown starter to start in both 2014 and 15. They've had a lot of pitchers flame out because that's just the nature of the game in drafting 18, 19, 20-year-olds. So if the Royals can just simply get 1 or 2 ace caliber starters out of those 47 names, Well, that's all they need. You don't need anybody else if you've got those top of the rotation arms. So I think the Royals fans should be very confident about the direction in which Kansas City is headed because of this new formula. There's an emphasis on power pitching, getting that starting rotation for 5-6 years that you have young guys under contract, and going from there, piecing together the bullpen. You already have a little bit of a core in the lineup, but then you can use pitching, as Dayton Moore said, as currency. Remember, in 2015, they traded 2 pitching prospects, Brandon Finnegan, Sean Manaea, for who? Johnny Cueto and Ben Zobrist. So whether or not these pitchers are a number 1 pitcher, number 3, a 5, a bullpen, or trade bait, the point is the Royals now have a lot of pitchers who scouts, analysts, and the team think very highly of. So you have to be confident in the direction that the future of the Royals is headed, and I think you could see a number of these guys as early as next year.
Yeah, pitchers are very, very valuable trade bait if you can get them to any point that they can play at the major league level. And then, of course, we've also seen, you talked about the bullpen, you talked about starters, but we've also seen what this organization is capable of doing with closers as well, in Wade Davis and Greg Holland, and those guys who have stepped up to the plate and not necessarily been closers in the past, but with the Royals, they turn in 2 great closers in that lineup. So I think that when you have that assortment of pitchers and guys, I think it's really great for Dayton because that's exactly what he loves to build and work with.